A filtering system for the tissue fluid. Lymph capillaries join each other to form small lymph vessels. These join to form larger lymph vessels, very much as smaller veins combine to form larger veins. In fact, lymph vessels are built very much like veins, except that their walls are even thinner. Like veins, lymph vessels have valves which keep the lymph from flowing backward. There is no pump for moving the lymph along its way as the heart moves blood through the arteries and capillaries. The lymph moves in the lymph vessels very much as blood moves in the veins, only much more slowly. It does so by action of the muscles assisted by the valves within the lymph vessels. As the muscles contract, they press upon the lymph vessels, and this forces the lymph to move along. It cannot go backward because of the valves which prevent its backward flow. The lymph vessels from both legs, from the left arm, from most of the organs of the body, and from the left side of the head join to form one large lymph vessel, which is called the thoracic duct. This duct pours its lymph into a large vein in the left side of the neck, where it mixes with the blood. The lymph from the right side of the head and from the right arm drains into another lymph vessel, which empties into a vein in the right side of the neck. Thus the lymph, which after all is just tissue fluid, is eventually returned to the blood stream from which it came. Along the course of the lymph vessels, tiny filtering organs called lymph nodes are interposed. When lymph nodes are studied under the microscope, they are found to contain meshworks of delicate connective tissue through which the lymph must pass slowly as it moves on its way. Lymph nodes also produce one of the kinds of white blood vessels called lymphocytes. Some of these stay in the lymph nodes for the purpose of combating any infection which might be trapped there, while others float away in the lymph and constitute one of the types of white blood cells that circulate in the blood. Now we begin to see the reason for having a separate system of lymph vessels. Sometimes when tissues become infected, germs find their way into the tissue fluid and thus into the lymph. The lymph nodes filter out these germs, and the lymphocytes, which are already stationed there, destroy the germs. Probably the lymph nodes also play an important part in producing antibodies. When a germ is taken into custody in a lymph node, its presence stimulates the production of the right kind of antibody to protect the body against the harmful effects which this germ can produce. Perhaps you have noticed small hard lumps, kernels in the side of your neck when you have had a sore throat. Or maybe you have noticed lumps under your arm when you have had an infection in your hand. These hard lumps are lymph nodes, which have become very active and thus enlarged in the work of combating the infection. These lymph nodes are often tender and painful. They are working as actively as they can to prevent the spread of infection to other parts of the body. In cases where the infection is so great that it overwhelms the lymph nodes in a certain part of the body, the lymph nodes themselves may break down, producing an abscess. In addition to germs, tissue fluids sometimes contain small particles of foreign material which have gained access to the tissues through an injury, through food that has been taken into the body, or through the air that is breathed. This possibility of small particles finding their way into the tissue fluid is especially pronounced in the lungs. When smoke or coal dust is in the air, small particles of carbon enter the air passages as one breathes. These find their way through the walls of the air passages and into the tissue fluid within the lungs. As the tissue fluid enters the small lymph vessels, it soon finds its way to the lymph nodes located in the vicinity. These nodes filter out the particles of carbon and retain them for the rest of life. Carbon is not soluble, and so there is no means by which it can be washed away by any of the body's fluids. In a person who has lived where there is a great deal of smoke, the lymph nodes inside his chest appear almost black because of the many carbon particles they contain. The lymph vessels that carry lymph from the breast are of special interest because they provide the usual route by which cancer cells are conveyed from cancer of the breast to other parts of the body. These lymph vessels converge in the axilla or in the base of the neck, and in these locations there are many lymph nodes which filter the lymph that originates in the breast. In a neglected case of cancer of the breast, it is these lymph nodes which becomes involved first as the cancer begins to metastasize in other parts of the body. In the surgical treatment of cancer of the breast, the surgeon often searches out and removes the lymph nodes in the axilla in the hope of eradicating those in which cancer cells may have already lodged. A filtering system for the tissues, you and your health.